The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully adjusting the pearl necklace that had once belonged to Diana. The delicate jewelry caught the light, sending tiny sparkles across her reflection. Today felt different somehow, though she couldn't quite place why. Perhaps it was the weight of recent months, watching King Charles navigate his new role while dealing with the pressures that came with the crown. William emerged from the adjoining dressing room, his navy blazer perfectly tailored, but Catherine noticed the slight tension in his shoulders that had become more pronounced lately. The responsibilities of being heir apparent seemed to grow heavier with each passing day, especially as his father adjusted to kingship during these challenging times. "The car will be here in 10 minutes, William said softly, his voice carrying the familiar warmth that had first captured Catherine's heart all those years ago at university. Yet underneath, she detected something else, a careful consideration, as if he were weighing every word before speaking. Catherine turned from the mirror, studying her husband's face. After more than a decade of marriage, she had learned to read the subtle signs that others might miss. The way he ran his hand through his hair when deep in thought, the slight furrow between his brows when something weighed on his mind, and, today, the way he seemed to be holding something back. "You've been quiet this morning," she observed, moving closer to him. The familiar scent of his cologne mixed with the morning air drifting through the open window created an intimate atmosphere in their private space. William's eyes met hers in the reflection of the mirror behind her. For a moment, vulnerability flickered across his features before he composed himself again. It was a look she had seen more frequently since his father's coronation, the weight of future kingship settling on his shoulders like an invisible cloak. "I keep thinking about father," William admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The way he looked yesterday during the Privy Council meeting. There's so much pressure on him, and sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough to support him." Catherine's heart swelled with the familiar mixture of love and concern she always felt when William opened up about his deepest worries. She reached up to straighten his tie, a gesture that had become their private ritual over the years, her way of offering comfort without words. "He's stronger than you think," she said gently. "But perhaps today's lunch will be exactly what he needs." Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most meaning. As they made their way through the corridors of their private residence, Catherine's mind wandered to the events that had led to this moment. The past few months had been a whirlwind of state functions, official duties, and public appearances. Through it all, she had watched the royal family navigate the delicate balance between public service and private emotion. The invitation to today's lunch had come directly from King Charles himself, delivered through his private secretary with a handwritten note that simply said, "I would value your company." It was unusual for the king to request such informal gatherings, especially during what was traditionally a busy period in the royal calendar. Their car pulled up to the entrance, and, as they settled into the plush seats, Catherine noticed William's hands clasped tightly in his lap. She placed her own hand gently over his, a silent gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes about their partnership. "Do you remember the first time we had lunch with your father after our engagement was announced?" Catherine asked, hoping to ease the tension she sensed in her husband. William's face softened with the memory. He was so nervous he knocked over his water glass twice. "I'd never seen him like that before, wanting so desperately for you to feel welcomed into the family. He told me that day that family was the most important thing in the world to him," Catherine recalled. "That everything else, the titles, the ceremonies, the public duties, they all meant nothing without the people you love beside you." The journey to the king's private residence took them through some of the most beautiful countryside in England. Rolling hills stretched endlessly in every direction, dotted with sheep and ancient stone walls that had stood for centuries. It was this timeless quality of the British landscape that had always provided comfort to the royal family during difficult times. As their car wound along the narrow roads, Catherine found herself thinking about the unique position they all occupied. The weight of history, tradition, and public expectation created a pressure unlike anything most people could imagine. Yet beneath all the formality and protocol, they remained a family with all the complexities, love, and occasional tensions that any family experiences. "I've been thinking about what we might say to him today," William said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "About Mother's birthday next month." Catherine's breath caught slightly. Diana's birthday was always a sensitive time for William, filled with a mixture of beautiful memories and profound loss. This year would mark what would have been her 62nd birthday, and Catherine knew that both William and Harry carried the weight of her absence especially heavily during these milestone moments. "What were you thinking?" she asked carefully, knowing that Diana's memory was something William guarded carefully but also something he increasingly wanted to honor publicly as their own children grew older. "A private memorial service, perhaps. Something small, intimate. Just family." William's voice grew stronger as he spoke, as if the idea was solidifying in his mind. "I think Father would appreciate being included, especially this year." Catherine squeezed his hand gently. The relationship between Charles and Diana had been complicated, marked by both genuine affection in the early years and painful difficulties later. But, in recent years, particularly since becoming a grandfather, Charles had spoken more openly about wanting to honor Diana's memory and ensure their sons felt comfortable sharing their mother's legacy with the next generation. "That's beautiful," Catherine said simply. "I think she would love knowing that you and your father are finding ways to remember her together." As they approached the king's residence, Catherine noticed the informal nature of the setting. There were no crowds of photographers, no red carpets or formal protocols. Instead, it felt almost like visiting any other family member, if that family member happened to be the King of England. The staff who greeted them were people they had known for years, faces that had become familiar through countless official functions and private gatherings. Their warm smiles and genuine pleasure at seeing Catherine and William spoke to the relationships that had developed over time, beyond the formal boundaries of their roles. King Charles emerged from the entrance before they had even fully exited their car, a gesture that immediately struck both William and Catherine as significant. In the complex world of royal protocol, such informality was rare and meaningful. "My dear Catherine," William, Charles called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard with unmistakable warmth. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." As they approached, Catherine was struck by how relaxed Charles appeared. Gone was the formal bearing that characterized his public appearances. Instead, he looked like what he was at his core, a father happy to see his son and daughter-in-law. The embrace between father and son lasted perhaps a moment longer than usual, and Catherine noticed the way Charles's eyes softened as he looked at William. There was something almost vulnerable in that look, as if he were seeing not the future king, but simply his beloved son. "Catherine, you look radiant as always," Charles said, taking her hands in his own. "I hope the children are well." "They're wonderful, thank you. George has been asking when he might visit the gardens again." "He's become quite fascinated with your organic farming methods," Catherine replied, genuinely delighted to share this connection between grandfather and grandson. Charles's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Excellent. Perhaps we can arrange something soon. Charlotte and Louis are welcome as well, of course. I've been experimenting with a new composting technique that I think they might find interesting." As they walked together toward the entrance, Catherine observed the easy conversation between Charles and William. There was something different about their interaction today, a warmth and openness that sometimes got lost in the formality of their official roles. The interior of the residence reflected Charles's personal tastes and interests. Watercolor paintings lined the walls, many painted by Charles himself during his travels around the Commonwealth. Books were scattered on side tables, covering subjects from architecture to environmental conservation. Fresh flowers from the gardens filled various vases, creating a lived-in, comfortable atmosphere. "I thought we might eat in the garden room today," Charles said, leading them through corridors filled with family photographs. "The light is particularly beautiful at this time of day, and I wanted to show you both the progress on the new herb garden." Catherine noticed William relaxing as they walked, his shoulders losing some of their earlier tension. There was something about being in this more intimate setting that seemed to strip away the layers of formality that usually surrounded royal interactions. The garden room was exactly as Charles had described, filled with natural light streaming through large windows that overlooked the meticulously maintained grounds. A round table had been set for three, with simple but elegant china and fresh flowers as a centerpiece. "This is lovely, Father," William said, and Catherine heard the genuine appreciation in his voice. "It feels very peaceful here." "That's exactly what I was hoping for," Charles replied, his smile reaching his eyes. I find that some of our most meaningful conversations happen when we can simply be ourselves, without all the ceremony and protocol. As they settled into their seats, Catherine felt a sense of anticipation building. There was clearly something on Charles's mind, something that had prompted this invitation. But, rather than feeling anxious about it, she found herself looking forward to whatever honest conversation might unfold. The meal began with Charles sharing stories about recent visits to various charities and organizations. His passion for the causes he supported was evident in every word, and Catherine found herself drawn in by his enthusiasm and genuine care for the people he met. "There was a young woman at the Literacy Center last week," Charles was saying, "who told me that learning to read had changed her entire life. She's now studying to become a teacher herself. It's moments like those that remind me why this work matters so much." William nodded, clearly moved by his father's words. "It must be incredibly rewarding to see that kind of direct impact." "It is," Charles agreed. "But it also makes me think about legacy, about what we leave behind and how we use the time we have." There was something in the way Charles said these words that made Catherine pay closer attention. She glanced at William and saw that he, too, had picked up on the deeper meaning behind their conversation. As the lunch continued, the conversation naturally flowed from official duties to more personal topics. Charles asked about the children's schooling, their interests, their friendships. He shared anecdotes about his own childhood, stories that William had heard before but that took on new meaning in this intimate setting. "I've been thinking a great deal lately about the importance of family," Charles said suddenly, setting down his fork and looking directly at both William and Catherine. "About how easy it can be to let the demands of duty overshadow the relationships that matter most." Catherine felt her heart rate quicken slightly. There was something building in this conversation, something important that Charles was working up to saying. "The responsibilities we carry can sometimes make us forget that at the end of the day, we're simply people who love each other," Charles continued. "I don't want to make that mistake anymore." William leaned forward slightly, his full attention focused on his father. "What do you mean?" Charles took a deep breath before continuing, and Catherine could see the emotion building behind his carefully composed exterior. "I mean that I want to make sure you both know how much you mean to me. How proud I am of the way you've handled everything that's been asked of you. How grateful I am for the stability and love you bring to our family." The sincerity in Charles's voice was unmistakable, and Catherine felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This was clearly not easy for him to say, but it was obviously something he felt needed to be expressed. "I know I haven't always been the most expressive father," Charles went on, his voice growing softer. "The way I was raised, the expectations of my generation, they didn't exactly encourage emotional openness. But, watching you two together, seeing the family you've built, it's made me realize what truly matters." Catherine reached across the table and gently placed her hand over Charles's. The gesture seemed to surprise him at first, but then his face softened with gratitude. "You've been a wonderful father-in-law to me," Catherine said quietly. "From the very beginning, you made me feel like part of the family. That meant more to me than you could ever know." Charles's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "You've brought such joy to William's life, and to all of ours. The way you've embraced your role, the dignity and warmth you bring to everything you do, it's been extraordinary to witness." William cleared his throat, clearly moved by the emotion in the room. "Father, you've always been there for us. Through every challenge, every milestone. We know how much you care, even when you don't say it directly." "But I should say it more," Charles insisted. "Life is too precious, too uncertain, to assume people know how we feel about them. I don't want to leave important things unsaid." The weight of his words settled over the table, and Catherine understood that this lunch was about more than just family bonding. Charles was opening his heart in a way that perhaps he never had before, sharing not just his feelings but his fears and hopes for their family's future. As the afternoon sunlight shifted through the garden room windows, casting new patterns of light and shadow across their table, Catherine felt that they were participating in something truly special, a moment of genuine connection that would be remembered long after the formal duties and public appearances were forgotten. The conversation continued to flow naturally, but everything felt different now. The emotional honesty that Charles had introduced changed the entire atmosphere, creating space for the kind of deep, meaningful exchange that rarely happens in the busy whirlwind of royal life. Catherine found herself thinking about her own parents, about the way her family had always prioritized emotional connection alongside achievement and duty. She had tried to bring that same warmth and openness to her marriage with William, and seeing Charles embrace these values felt like a validation of everything she had hoped their family could become. The emotional atmosphere from their earlier conversation had settled into something deeper and more comfortable as Charles led them through his private gardens after lunch. The afternoon sun painted everything in golden hues, and Catherine noticed how the informality of their walk seemed to encourage even more honest communication between father and son. "I wanted to show you both something special," Charles said, his voice carrying an excitement that Catherine hadn't heard before. He guided them along a winding path bordered by carefully tended rose bushes, each variety meticulously labeled with small plaques that showed Charles's attention to detail. As they rounded a corner, Catherine gasped softly. Before them lay a section of the garden that had been completely transformed since her last visit. A beautiful memorial area had been created, centered around a stunning oak tree that must have been recently planted. Beneath the tree, a simple stone bench bore an inscription that made William stop in his tracks. "In loving memory of all those we have lost, and in celebration of the love that remains," William read aloud, his voice catching slightly on the words. Charles watched his son's reaction carefully. "I wanted to create a place where we could remember your mother, and my parents, and all the family members who are no longer with us. But also a place that celebrates the family we still have." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes as she realized the significance of what Charles had done. This wasn't just about honoring the dead, it was about affirming the importance of the living relationships that remained. "Father, this is..." William began, but seemed unable to find adequate words. "I know how difficult Diana's birthday is for you each year," Charles said gently. "And I know that sometimes the public memorials and media attention can make private grief feel impossible. I thought perhaps we needed a place that was just for us, where you could come and remember her in peace." William walked slowly toward the bench, running his fingers along the smooth stone. Catherine could see the emotion working across his face, grief for his mother mixing with gratitude for his father's thoughtfulness. "She would have loved this place," William said finally. "The garden, the privacy, the way you've made it feel so peaceful." Charles moved to stand beside his son, and Catherine was struck by how similar they looked in that moment, the same height, the same thoughtful expression, the same way of carrying themselves when deeply moved. "I have something else I wanted to share with you both," Charles said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He withdrew a small leather journal, worn with age and handling. "I've been writing letters to your mother, William. Not regularly, just when important things happen that I wish I could tell her about." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. The vulnerability of this admission was almost overwhelming. "I wrote about your wedding day," Charles continued, his voice growing softer. "About how beautiful Catherine looked, how happy you both seemed, how I wish Diana could have been there to see her son so in love." William's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. "May I read it?" Charles handed over the journal without hesitation. "This particular entry, yes. I think you should know what I wrote." As William opened the journal and began to read silently, Catherine watched Charles's face. The king's expression was a mixture of nervousness and hope, as if he were waiting for judgment on something extremely personal and important. After several minutes, William looked up, tears streaming openly down his face. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for remembering her this way." "She was the mother of my son," Charles replied. "That alone would have made her important to me. But she was also a remarkable woman in her own right, and I want to make sure that's never forgotten." Catherine moved closer to her husband, placing a supportive hand on his back as he composed himself. The emotional weight of this moment was intense, but it felt healing rather than painful. "Could we plant something here together?" William asked suddenly. "Maybe a rose bush?" "She always loved roses." "I was hoping you might say that," Charles smiled. "I have several varieties in mind. We could choose one together." As they walked toward the gardening area where Charles kept his tools and supplies, Catherine found herself thinking about the complexity of family relationships. The dynamic between Charles and William had often been analyzed by the media, dissected and interpreted by people who had no real understanding of the love and complications that existed between them. "Catherine, I hope you don't mind my asking," Charles said as they examined various rose plants, "but I've been wondering how you help the children understand their grandmother Diana. It must be challenging to share someone's memory when you never had the chance to meet them yourself." Catherine was touched by the thoughtfulness of the question. "I try to focus on the qualities William tells me about: her kindness, her sense of humor, her love for people. And I share stories about how those same qualities live on in their father." Charles nodded approvingly. "That's beautifully done. I think Diana would be so grateful to know her children are being raised with such wisdom and care." William selected a pale pink rose bush, explaining that pink had been his mother's favorite color. As the three of them worked together to plant it in the memorial garden, Catherine was struck by how natural this family moment felt. There was something deeply healing about literally putting down roots together, creating something beautiful that would grow and flourish for years to come. "I've been thinking about what you said at lunch," William said as he carefully packed soil around the new plant. "About not leaving important things unsaid." Charles looked up from where he was adjusting the plant's position. "What's on your mind?" "I want you to know that I'm proud to be your son," William said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Not just because of your title or your position, but because of who you are as a person. The way you care about people, the way you've dedicated your life to service, the way you're always trying to make things better." Charles stopped his gardening activities entirely, giving William his full attention. Catherine could see that this affirmation meant everything to him. "I know I don't always show it," William continued. "The pressures of our roles sometimes make it difficult to express personal feelings. But I want you to know that I respect you deeply, and I'm grateful for the example you've set." Charles's composure finally broke, and tears streamed down his face as he embraced his son. Catherine felt her own emotions overflow as she witnessed this moment of pure connection between the two men she loved most. "I'm so proud of the man you've become," Charles said, his voice thick with emotion. "The husband, the father, the future king. Your mother would be bursting with pride." As father and son held each other, Catherine felt overwhelmed by the beauty of this moment. In a world where their every public interaction was scrutinized and analyzed, this private expression of love felt revolutionary. When they finally separated, both men were smiling through their tears. The emotional release seemed to have created space for even more honest conversation. "I want to tell you about something that's been weighing on my mind," Charles said, settling onto the memorial bench they had seen earlier. "About the crown, and the future, and my hopes for how we might do things differently." William and Catherine joined him on the bench, and Catherine noticed how comfortable this felt. Three people who happened to be royals, but in this moment were simply family members sharing their deepest thoughts. "I've been thinking about the coronation, about the symbolism of it all," Charles began. "The ceremony was beautiful, meaningful, but it also felt very much rooted in the past. I want to make sure that as we move forward, we're building something that speaks to the future as well." "What do you mean?" Catherine asked, genuinely curious about Charles's vision. "I mean finding ways to honor tradition while also embracing change," Charles replied. "Making the monarchy more accessible, more relatable, more connected to the real lives of the people we serve." William leaned forward, clearly interested in this direction. "I've been thinking about similar things. About how we might use our positions to address the challenges facing people today: mental health, environmental concerns, economic inequality." "Exactly," Charles said, his enthusiasm building. "I want to use whatever time I have as king to build foundations that you can expand upon. To create new traditions alongside the old ones." Catherine found herself thinking about her own role in this vision. As someone who had married into the royal family as an adult, she often felt uniquely positioned to understand both the inside and outside perspectives. "I think people are hungry for authenticity," she offered. "They want to see that we're real people with genuine care for the issues that affect them. Moments like today, conversations like this, obviously private ones, but the spirit of this kind of connection could inform how we approach our public duties." Charles nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, exactly. I've been thinking about ways to break down some of the barriers that can make the monarchy feel distant or irrelevant. As the afternoon progressed, their conversation evolved into a wide-ranging discussion about their shared values, their hopes for the future, and their commitment to service. Catherine was struck by how aligned they all were in their fundamental beliefs, despite sometimes having different ideas about implementation. "I want to share something else with you both," Charles said as the sun began to set lower in the sky. "I've been working on a project, something I hope will become part of my legacy." He explained that he had been quietly developing a comprehensive program for young people, combining environmental education, practical skills training, and leadership development. The program would provide opportunities for young people from all backgrounds to gain experience, build confidence, and develop the tools they needed to become leaders in their communities. "It's still in the early stages," Charles said, "but I was hoping you might both consider becoming involved. Your perspectives, especially Catherine's background in early childhood development, could be invaluable." William and Catherine exchanged glances, and Catherine could see the excitement building in her husband's eyes. This was exactly the kind of forward-thinking initiative they had both hoped to be involved with. "We'd be honored to help," William said without hesitation. "It sounds like exactly the kind of program that could make a real difference." "The timing feels perfect," Catherine added. "Our children are getting older, and I've been looking for ways to expand my own involvement in youth development programs." Charles's face lit up with genuine joy. "This means more to me than you know. The idea of us working together on something meaningful, building something that will last, it feels like the right way to use our positions." As they continued to discuss the details of the youth program, Catherine noticed how naturally the conversation flowed between practical planning and emotional connection. They were functioning as a true family unit, bringing their different strengths and perspectives together for a common purpose. "I have one more thing I wanted to ask you both," Charles said as the evening light began to fade around them. "It's more personal than professional." Catherine felt a familiar flutter of anticipation. Charles had already shared so much today, and she couldn't imagine what other emotional revelation might be coming. "I've been thinking about Christmas this year," Charles continued. "About starting some new family traditions alongside the established ones. I wondered if you might consider spending part of the holiday here, in a more informal setting." The request was simple, but Catherine understood its significance. Royal Christmas celebrations were typically formal, structured affairs with rigid protocols and carefully planned activities. Charles was suggesting something much more intimate and personal. "I love that idea," Catherine said immediately. The children would be thrilled to spend more time with their grandfather in a relaxed setting. William nodded in agreement. "It would be wonderful to have some unstructured time together as a family." "Excellent," Charles said, clearly pleased. "I was thinking we might establish some new traditions, perhaps each family member could choose an activity to share with the group. Something meaningful to them that they'd like the others to experience." As they made their way back toward the main house in the gathering twilight, Catherine reflected on how dramatically the day had exceeded her expectations. What had begun as a simple lunch invitation had evolved into something much deeper, a rekindling of family bonds, a sharing of hopes and dreams, and a commitment to building stronger relationships going forward. The walk back through the gardens gave them time to process everything that had been shared. Catherine noticed that both William and Charles seemed lighter somehow, as if the emotional honesty of the day had lifted weights they hadn't even realized they were carrying. "Thank you for today," William said as they reached the entrance to the house. "I can't remember the last time I felt so connected to family." "Thank you for being open to it," Charles replied. "I know this kind of emotional sharing doesn't come naturally to any of us, but it feels so important." Catherine squeezed both their arms gently. "This is how family should feel," she said simply. "This is what I want our children to remember about their family." As they stood together in the fading light, Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude for this unexpected gift of connection and understanding. The day had revealed depths of love and commitment that often got lost in the formal requirements of their public roles. The drive home that evening was filled with a comfortable silence that spoke volumes about the emotional transformation they had all experienced. Catherine watched the countryside pass by in the gathering dusk, her mind still processing the depth of connection she had witnessed between Charles and William. The vulnerable honesty they had shared felt like a gift that would continue to unfold in the days and weeks to come. "I keep thinking about what Father said," William said suddenly, breaking the peaceful quiet. "About not leaving important things unsaid. It makes me realize how many assumptions I've made over the years about what he was thinking or feeling." Catherine turned to study her husband's profile in the dim light of the car. "What kinds of assumptions?" "I think I always interpreted his reserve as lack of emotion, rather than understanding it as the way he was taught to express love," William replied thoughtfully. "Today showed me how much feeling was always there, just waiting for permission to be shared." Catherine reached for William's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that had become natural over their years together. "Your father has always loved you deeply." Today he just found the courage to say it directly. "I want to make sure I don't make the same mistakes with George, Charlotte, and Louis," William said firmly. "I want them to always know exactly how their father feels about them." Catherine's heart swelled with love for her husband's self-reflection and commitment to growth. "They already know you love them completely. But, yes, saying it explicitly, the way your father did today, that will mean everything to them as they grow up." As they approached their own residence, Catherine found herself thinking about how to process this day with their children. George, at his age, was beginning to understand more about the complexities of royal life and family relationships. She wanted to find ways to share the positive aspects of today's experience without overwhelming him with adult emotions. "Should we tell the children about the memorial garden?" Catherine asked. "About their grandfather's gesture for their grandmother Diana?" William considered this carefully. "I think so, in an age-appropriate way. I want them to understand that their grandfather cares about their grandmother's memory, and that it's possible to honor people we've lost while also celebrating the family we have." The next morning brought a return to their regular routines, but Catherine noticed that something fundamental had shifted in William's demeanor. He seemed more relaxed, more present with the children during breakfast. When George asked about their visit to Grandpa Charles, William's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Grandpa showed us his special garden where we can remember people who are very important to us," William explained, settling next to his son at the breakfast table. "We planted a rose bush together for your grandmother Diana." "The grandmother I never met?" George asked with the direct curiosity that Catherine loved about him. "That's right," William replied. "And Grandpa wanted to make sure we had a beautiful place where we could think about her and feel close to her." Charlotte, who had been listening while carefully spreading jam on her toast, looked up with interest. "Can we visit the garden sometime?" "I'm sure Grandpa would love that," Catherine said, smiling at her daughter's eagerness. "He's very excited about sharing his gardens with all of you." Later that morning, Catherine received an unexpected phone call from Charles's private secretary. The king wanted to invite them for dinner the following week, and he hoped they might bring the children. The informality of the invitation, delivered through official channels but, with personal warmth, felt like a continuation of the new openness they had established. When Catherine relayed the invitation to William, his immediate smile confirmed that he was just as eager to build on the previous day's emotional breakthrough. "I want to do something special for Father," William said suddenly. "Something that shows we heard what he was trying to tell us yesterday." Catherine was intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "I've been thinking about that youth program he described," William replied, his excitement building as he spoke. "What if we could present him with some concrete ideas for how we might contribute? Show him that we're serious about being partners in this work?" The idea energized Catherine immediately. She had spent years developing expertise in early childhood development, and the thought of applying that knowledge to Charles's vision felt perfectly aligned with her own values and interests. They spent the afternoon researching existing youth programs, identifying gaps that Charles's initiative might fill, and brainstorming ways their unique positions and platforms could add value to his vision. Catherine was struck by how naturally she and William worked together when focused on a shared purpose. "We could create mentorship components," Catherine suggested, looking up from her laptop where she had been reviewing research on youth development programs. "Pair young people with adults who can provide guidance and support as they develop their leadership skills. And we could incorporate environmental education in practical ways," William added. Hands-on projects that teach sustainability while also building confidence and teamwork. As they developed their ideas, Catherine felt the same sense of energy and purpose that had characterized their most successful joint initiatives over the years. There was something deeply satisfying about using their positions to create meaningful opportunities for others. That evening, as they tucked the children into bed, Catherine noticed how the emotional openness from Charles seemed to be influencing William's interactions with their own family. He lingered longer at each bedside, sharing more detailed stories about his day, asking more thoughtful questions about their experiences. "Daddy, you seem extra happy tonight," Charlotte observed with the perceptiveness that often surprised Catherine. "I am extra happy," William replied, sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed. Sometimes grown-ups have conversations that help them understand important things about their family, and yesterday I had one of those conversations. "What did you understand?" George called from his own bed across the room. William looked toward Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. "I understood that it's important to tell the people you love exactly how much they mean to you. So I want to make sure you all know that you are the most precious things in the world to your mother and me." The simple directness of William's words created a moment of beautiful connection in the children's bedroom. Catherine could see the impact on all three children, the way they settled more deeply into their beds, secure in the explicit knowledge of their parents' love. "We love you too, Daddy," Louis said sleepily, and Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at the natural ease with which her youngest son expressed his feelings. After the children were asleep, Catherine and William settled in their private sitting room to continue working on their presentation for Charles. The lamplight created an intimate atmosphere as they spread papers and documents across the coffee table. "I keep thinking about something else Father said yesterday," Catherine said, looking up from her notes. "About wanting to create new traditions alongside the old ones." William set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "What about it?" "I think what we experienced yesterday, the level of emotional honesty and connection, maybe that could become a new tradition for our family," Catherine said thoughtfully. "Regular opportunities for us to step away from our official roles and just be honest with each other about what's in our hearts." William's expression grew thoughtful as he considered this idea. "Like scheduled times for genuine conversation?" "Not scheduled exactly, but intentional," Catherine clarified. "Making sure we create space for the kind of sharing that happened yesterday, rather than assuming it will happen naturally amidst all our other responsibilities." "I love that idea," William said immediately. "And I think Father would too. Maybe we could suggest it as part of those new Christmas traditions he mentioned." They worked late into the evening, fueled by enthusiasm for their developing plans and gratitude for the new depth in their family relationships. When they finally went to bed, Catherine felt a sense of anticipation for the future that she hadn't experienced in quite this way before. The following day brought news that added another layer of significance to their recent experiences. Charles's private secretary called to inform them that the king had decided to establish an annual award in Diana's name, recognizing young people who demonstrated exceptional commitment to helping others. "He wanted you both to know about this decision personally, before any public announcements," the secretary explained. "His Majesty hopes you'll consider being involved in the selection process." When Catherine shared this news with William, she watched his face cycle through surprise, emotion, and deep gratitude. "He's really listening," William said, his voice filled with wonder. "He's taking everything we talked about and finding ways to honor all of it: mother's memory, our family connections, the importance of supporting young people." "It's beautiful," Catherine agreed. "And it shows how much yesterday meant to him too." They decided to surprise Charles by presenting their youth program ideas in person rather than sending them through official channels. Catherine called his private secretary to arrange an informal visit, explaining only that they had some thoughts to share about his recent projects. When they arrived at Charles's residence 2 days later, they found him in his study, surrounded by papers and books related to various charitable initiatives. His face lit up when he saw them, and Catherine was struck again by how much more relaxed and open he had become since their emotional lunch. "This is a wonderful surprise," Charles said, rising to greet them with warm embraces. "I hope everything is well." "Everything is very well," William replied. "We actually came because we've been working on something we wanted to share with you." Catherine pulled out the folder containing their research and recommendations, but before handing it over, she wanted to acknowledge what Charles had done. "We heard about the Diana Award for Young People," she said. "We can't express how much that means to us, especially the way you've connected it to supporting the kind of young people she cared about most." Charles's eyes grew bright with emotion. "Your mother had such a gift for seeing potential in people who felt overlooked. This seemed like a fitting way to honor that gift while also supporting the next generation." William stepped forward to hand Charles their folder. "We've been working on some ideas for your youth development program. We want to be real partners in this work, not just figureheads." As Charles opened the folder and began reading their detailed proposals, Catherine watched his expression carefully. She could see his surprise giving way to excitement as he realized the depth of thought and research they had put into their recommendations. "This is extraordinary work," Charles said after several minutes of reading. "These ideas would transform the program from something good into something truly groundbreaking." "We're serious about this," Catherine said. "About working together, about using our positions to create real opportunities for young people, about building something meaningful that can last for generations." Charles set down the folder and looked directly at both of them. "Yesterday changed something for me," he said quietly. "Not just in terms of our family relationships, but in terms of what I want to accomplish as king. Having you both as genuine partners in this work, it means everything to me." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Catherine had experienced in her years as a member of the royal family. They talked as equals, as collaborators, as people united by shared values and common purpose. The hierarchical formality that usually characterized royal family interactions was completely absent. "I have an idea," Charles said suddenly. "What if we announced this program together? Not as separate initiatives from different members of the royal family, but as a joint effort that represents our shared commitment to the next generation?" Catherine felt a thrill of excitement at this suggestion. Joint initiatives were relatively rare in the royal family, and they represented a level of partnership and mutual respect that was deeply meaningful. "I think that would send a powerful message," William agreed. "About our family working together, about the monarchy evolving to meet contemporary needs, about the importance of collaboration." As they discussed the practical details of moving forward with their joint initiative, Catherine found herself thinking about how dramatically their family dynamic had shifted in just a few days. The emotional breakthrough at lunch had created space for genuine partnership and collaboration that felt both natural and revolutionary. "I want to ask you both something," Charles said as their meeting wound down. "That dinner invitation for next week, I was hoping we might use it as an opportunity to discuss some of these ideas with the children. Age appropriately, of course, but I think they're old enough to understand that their family is working together to help people." Catherine loved this idea immediately. They would be so proud to know that their grandfather, father, and mother are working together on something important. And it would help them understand that service isn't just about attending events, William added. "It's about identifying problems and working to solve them." As they prepared to leave, Charles walked them to their car personally, another gesture of informality that spoke to the new ease in their relationship. "Thank you," he said simply. "For your ideas, your partnership, and, most importantly, for helping me understand that we can be both a royal family and simply a family who loves each other." Catherine hugged him warmly, feeling grateful beyond words for the transformation they had all experienced. "Thank you for showing us that it's possible to honor tradition while also creating something new." The drive home that afternoon felt like a celebration, though of what exactly, Catherine couldn't have said. Perhaps they were celebrating the discovery that love and respect and shared purpose could coexist with duty and service and public responsibility. Or maybe they were simply celebrating the gift of deeper connection with someone they had always cared about but hadn't always known how to reach. The dinner at Charles's residence the following week proved to be another milestone in their family's emotional journey. Catherine had spent considerable time preparing the children for what would be a more intimate gathering than their usual formal visits with their grandfather. She wanted them to understand that this was an opportunity to see a different side of their grandfather and to contribute to meaningful family conversations. "Remember, this isn't like our usual visits to see Grandpa at official events," Catherine explained as they dressed for dinner. Tonight he wants to talk with us like we're any other family spending time together. George, who had been listening carefully, looked up from tying his shoes. Does that mean we can ask him questions about things we're curious about? Absolutely, William replied, straightening George's collar. Grandpa specifically said he hopes you'll all share your thoughts and ideas with him. When they arrived, Charles greeted each child individually, kneeling down to their level and asking genuine questions about their interests and activities. Catherine watched with delight as her normally reserved father-in-law engaged enthusiastically with Charlotte's description of her art project and Louis's explanation of his favorite playground game. I thought we might eat in the smaller dining room tonight, Charles said, leading them through corridors lined with family photographs spanning generations. I've asked the kitchen to prepare some of your favorite foods, and I was hoping we could have a proper conversation about some exciting projects we're working on. The smaller dining room was cozy and informal, with a round table that encouraged conversation and windows overlooking the gardens where they had shared such meaningful moments the week before. Catherine noticed that Charles had arranged for child-friendly place settings alongside the elegant adult china, another thoughtful gesture that made the children feel included rather than accommodated. As they settled around the table, Charles raised his glass of water in a small toast to family conversations and new adventures together. The children giggled as they clinked their glasses against their grandfathers, and Catherine felt her heart swell with affection for this new version of their family dynamic. Grandpa, Daddy told us you're working on something special for young people, Charlotte said during the first course, her natural confidence shining through. Charles's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. I am indeed. And your parents have been helping me make it even better. Would you like to hear about it? What followed was a conversation unlike any Catherine had witnessed in a royal family setting. Charles explained his youth development program in terms the children could understand, describing how they wanted to help young people learn important skills and become leaders in their communities. The children asked thoughtful questions and offered surprisingly insightful suggestions. Could they learn about taking care of animals? Louis asked. I think that would be important. What an excellent idea, Charles replied seriously. Environmental stewardship includes caring for animals. We should definitely include that component. Catherine exchanged a meaningful glance with William. The natural way Charles incorporated their children's ideas into serious policy discussion showed a level of respect for young people's perspectives that would undoubtedly inform their program development. I've been thinking about something else too, Charles said as the main course was served. I wanted to ask all of you about creating some new family traditions. Things we could do together that would be special just for us. What kind of traditions? George asked, clearly intrigued by this concept. Well, for example, what if each of us chose one activity that we thought the others would enjoy, and we shared it together during our holiday celebrations? Charles suggested. Something meaningful to each person that they'd like the family to experience. The children were immediately excited by this idea, and suggestions began flowing around the table. Charlotte wanted to teach everyone watercolor painting techniques she had learned. George proposed a family hiking expedition to explore historical sites. Louis, after careful consideration, suggested they all learn to bake bread together. And what about the grown-ups? Charlotte asked. What would you choose, Grandpa? Charles smiled thoughtfully. I think I'd like to share some stargazing with all of you. There's something magical about looking at the night sky together and talking about the vastness of the universe. That sounds perfect, William said warmly. I was thinking about teaching everyone some basic photography skills, so we could document our new traditions as we create them. Catherine felt deeply moved by the collaborative spirit of this conversation. I'd love to share some cooking with everyone, not fancy dishes, but comfort foods that bring families together. As dinner progressed, the conversation naturally evolved to include stories about Diana, shared in a way that felt celebratory rather than sad. Charles told the children about their grandmother's sense of humor, her love for adventure, and her gift for making everyone around her feel special. Your grandmother would have adored this kind of evening, Charles said, looking around the table at his family. She always said the best conversations happened around dinner tables, when people could relax and truly listen to each other. I wish we could have met her, Charlotte said wistfully. You carry parts of her with you, Charles replied gently. Your father's kindness comes from her, and your sense of curiosity, and your ability to make people feel comfortable. She lives on in all the good things about our family. Catherine watched William's face during this exchange and saw the peaceful acceptance there. The grief for his mother would always be present, but Charles's way of honoring Diana's memory was helping to transform that grief into something nurturing rather than painful. After dinner, Charles surprised them by suggesting they visit the memorial garden in the evening light. The children were thrilled to see the rose bush they had heard about, and Catherine was touched by the reverent way they approached the memorial bench. This is where we remember people who are important to us, William explained to the children. And where we think about how much we love the family we have right now. Can we come here sometimes when we miss people? George asked with the emotional intelligence that often surprised Catherine. Absolutely, Charles replied. This garden belongs to all of us. It's a place where we can remember, and think, and feel grateful for love. As they walked back toward the house, Louis slipped his small hand into Charles's larger one. Grandpa, I think today was my favorite day. Charles stopped walking and knelt down to Louis's level. Mine too, he said simply. Today felt like what family is supposed to feel like. The drive home that evening was filled with excited chatter from the children about their new traditions, their grandfather's projects, and their plans for future visits to the memorial garden. Catherine listened to their enthusiasm and felt profound gratitude for the transformation their family had undergone in such a short time. The children felt so included tonight, she said to William once they were alone. Your father has such a gift for making them feel like their opinions and ideas really matter. He's become the grandfather I always hoped he would be, William replied. And, more than that, he's become the kind of family leader who brings out the best in all of us. Over the following weeks, the momentum from their dinner continued to build. Charles began involving Catherine and William in more substantial ways in his charitable work, seeking their input on policy decisions and including them in planning meetings. The joint youth program began taking shape as a genuinely collaborative initiative. Catherine found herself looking forward to their family interactions in ways she never had before. The emotional honesty that had emerged from their initial lunch had created space for deeper relationships with Charles, but it had also influenced her own parenting and her partnership with William. I've been thinking about something, Catherine said one evening as she and William reviewed materials for their upcoming program announcement. About how much our family has changed in just a few weeks. William looked up from his laptop. What about it? I think what your father did that day at lunch, being vulnerable, expressing his feelings directly, asking for what he needed, I think it gave all of us permission to be more authentic with each other, Catherine said thoughtfully. You're right, William agreed. It's like he modeled a different way of being family, and, once we experienced it, we couldn't go back to the old patterns. I want to make sure we don't lose this, Catherine said. This openness, this collaboration, this sense of being partners rather than just relatives fulfilling roles. William reached across to take her hand. We won't lose it. What we've built together feels too valuable to let slip away. The public announcement of their joint youth initiative came a month after their initial lunch, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Media coverage focused on the collaborative nature of the program and the innovative approaches they were implementing. But, for Catherine, the most meaningful aspect was the private satisfaction of working alongside her family on something that would make a genuine difference in young people's lives. The night before the announcement, Charles called to thank them both for their partnership and commitment. This program is going to succeed because it represents our shared values, he said. But, more than that, working together on it has given me some of the happiest moments I've had as king. It's been transformative for all of us, Catherine replied. Not just the program itself, but the way we've learned to work together as a family. As the months passed, their new family dynamic continued to evolve and deepen. The children's relationship with their grandfather flourished as Charles made time for individual activities with each of them. The adult relationships grew stronger as they discovered new ways to support each other's work and personal growth. Catherine often found herself thinking about that initial lunch and marveling at how one person's courage to be vulnerable had catalyzed such profound change in their entire family system. Charles's decision to express his feelings directly and ask for deeper connection had created a ripple effect that touched every relationship. The Christmas celebrations that year were unlike any they had experienced as a royal family. The new traditions they had discussed were implemented alongside the formal protocols, creating a holiday season that honored both their public responsibilities and their private relationships. On Christmas morning, as Catherine watched Charles helping Louis with a watercolor painting while William photographed Charlotte's bread-making lesson, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey their family had taken together. "This is what he was hoping for that day at lunch, isn't it?" William said, coming to stand beside her as they watched the scene unfold. "I think he was hoping for connection," Catherine replied. "But I don't think even he imagined it could lead to all this, the collaboration, the new traditions, the way the children relate to him now." "The Memorial Garden dedication next month is going to be beautiful," William said. "Having the children help plant flowers while we remember Mother, it feels like everything has come full circle." Catherine nodded, thinking about how Diana's memory had become a source of connection rather than painful separation between Charles and William. The healing that had taken place around that relationship felt like one of the most precious gifts to emerge from their family's transformation. "Your father is remarkable," Catherine said simply. "The courage it took to break through decades of emotional patterns, to risk vulnerability for the sake of deeper relationships, I think it changed all of us permanently." As the afternoon wound down and they prepared for the evening's formal Christmas dinner, Catherine reflected on how seamlessly they had learned to balance their public roles with their private relationships. The emotional authenticity they had discovered didn't diminish their effectiveness as working royals, instead, it seemed to enhance their ability to connect with the people they served. "I want to tell Father something before we leave today," William said as they gathered their belongings. "Something I should have said weeks ago." Catherine waited while William found Charles, who was helping the children collect their art projects from their afternoon activities. "Father, I wanted to thank you," William said, his voice carrying the same directness that had characterized their conversations since that transformative lunch. "Not just for today, or for the program, but for showing us all what's possible when family members choose to be brave with each other." Charles's face filled with the warm emotion that had become his default expression during family gatherings. "Thank you for being brave with me too. For trusting that love was stronger than old patterns." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes as she witnessed this continued evolution in their relationship. The growth they had all experienced felt sustainable and genuine, built on mutual respect and shared commitment rather than temporary enthusiasm. As they drove home through the winter evening, the children sleepy and content in the back seat, Catherine found herself thinking about legacy. Not the formal legacy of titles and ceremonies, but the emotional legacy they were creating together, a family culture based on honest communication, mutual support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. "I think this is what your mother would have wanted most," Catherine said quietly to William. "Not perfection, but authenticity. Not formal correctness, but real love expressed in real ways." William smiled, his face peaceful in the dashboard light. "I think you're right. And I think she would be so proud of the family we've all become together." The transformation that had begun with a simple lunch invitation had become something far greater than any of them had imagined, a new way of being family that honored both their public duties and their private hearts, a legacy of love that would influence generations to come.